My name is Nadia Green, and I am a freshman from the University of Louisville. I will be reading an excerpt from my chapter, I Am the Dancer I Wanted to Be, which goes through my experiences with both professional and recreational dance. It was a fondue coupe, tendu ball change, releve coupe passe, and balance combination, with left hand at the bar, starting with preparation in second, feet, fifth position. Classical ballet is like math. There is a right way to do everything. A lot of dancers start their studies off with classical ballet because they are often told it is the foundation of all dance and it teaches techniques and mechanics that are universal throughout any dance form. Most of my years of instruction were spent with a contemporary amalgamation of ballet, jazz, and modern, all of whose movements and vernaculars stray away from Eurocentric dance and bring in elements of dances from Africa and African American culture. I only took 3 years of classical ballet, so when I encounter this dance form, it's usually more advanced than anything I've ever seen. The contemporary ballet company Complexions, founded by two dancers from the Alvin Ailey Dance Company, had come to Louisville to give master classes and hold mock auditions for young dancers from the Louisville Ballet, Louisville Dance Alliance, and my group's Arts Reach. Arts Reach offers female dance students professional grade classes in the ballroom of the Chestnut Street YMCA. It would be a practice auditions where the instructors would tell us what most professional auditions would expect from us. The other girls in the room were around my age. They were all slimmer and they towered over me. Clusters of dancers were scattered at the bars that stretched across the room, chatting as they stretched. It seemed like most of them knew each other. All of them were wearing ballet shoes and some form of leotard and tights. Some wore pink tights and black leotards, while others wore black tights and flashy leg warmers, or maybe even a tan leotard and tan tights. All of us from Arts Reach wore sweats and stood barefoot. Compared to the other dancers who spent 6 days a week in the dance studio, compared to our 1 day a week, I knew we had no chance of impressing anyone. The instructors, one male and the other female, were at most 7 years older than me. It was so surreal seeing the ideal dancer in real life. Long legs, slender frame, short torso, and long neck. I was mesmerized by the difference between me and them. Not too much older than me, the male instructor was even from Louisville and had reached heights and accomplishments that I have only dreamt of. They were bubbly and energetic as they encouraged us to stretch before the first bar exercise. I glanced around me and making eye contact with the girls from the other groups. Their eyes were trembling anxiously and I couldn't help but chuckle, thinking, they'll be fine. It's us Arts Reach dancers who should be worried. Do we really belong here? Yet I wouldn't let myself be intimidated. I posted myself at the front bar so I could see the two instructors' feet, while the other girls from Arts Reach lingered behind. It was clear to me that this audition would be difficult.
Hi, my name is Craig Wright. I'm a freshman at the University of Louisville, and my chapter name is The Lesson at the Bottom of the Hill. This chapter is basically about the hardships me and my family had to go through, with my dad being in jail. But the main focus of this chapter is about how I dealt with it and my own personal emotions. While my father was locked up, our main way of communication was letters. It wasn't the most up-to-date form of communication, but considering the situation, it was the fastest. My mind went completely blank every time I went to write them. Sometimes I got so frustrated that I tore the paper in half and had to start over. When I finally finished a letter, my mom would mail it off, and I'd remember something I hadn't included. I'd be so disappointed in myself because I wanted to make sure everything was perfect. My mom did a great job of raising me on her own, but the wisdom of things that only a father and son could talk about was lost to me. I always felt an emptiness, like there was a hole in my heart that only he could fill. I wanted to hear the words he wrote come from his mouth. You never realize how much you miss the little meaningless conversations or arguments with a person until you can't have them anymore. I kept every letter that he sent to me. Over 100 letters. I cherished them. I made a deal with myself to keep all of them until the day he got home. Then I would get rid of them. Because as much as I loved the letters, I only loved them because they were my only form of response from my dad while he was gone. I kept them all in a folder, hidden from everyone. And when I was sad or lonely, or whenever I missed him, I would read one of the letters, and it would give me the motivation to keep on pushing. One night, my mom, my sister, and I were all sitting at a table eating dinner and having normal family small talk when she paused for a moment and then said, "I need each of you to write a letter to the parole board telling them why you think your dad should be let out. It doesn't have to be long. I just want to make sure that you both do something. Just write whatever you feel is right." The way she explained it, it was so simple, but doing it was a whole other story. Every time I tried to think of something, my mind went blank. I procrastinated to the last day because I just didn't know what I would write. I wanted the parole board to read it and think, okay, maybe he is a good person. I would constantly think to myself, if I mess up, will he not get out? As these thoughts kept piling into my head, the computer screen seemed to get bigger and closer, as if preparing to grab me and swallow me whole. After talking to my mom, it finally hit me that instead of thinking about writing to the parole board, I decided to write as if I was trying to convince my dad to come home. I wrote about the good times we had, about how close we were, about the time I earned my wings, and when we went fishing together. After that, the letter just seemed to form itself in front of me.
Hello, my name is Naya. I'm 17 years old. I am a senior at Central High School, and today I will be reading an excerpt from my chapter, Still Yourself, But Not the Same. I'll be talking about abuse that my family went through in the past and how we've overcome it today. Throughout all the emotional, spiritual, and psychological effects of my parents' divorce, my mom didn't have time to manifest and be to herself. Like a double-knotted string, she was confused about how to get out of her previous relationship. But she wanted so badly to be loved. I was 8 years old when my mother introduced us to a new man. He was 6'6", buff, his head round, and his face always freshly shaved. He wore baggy old clothing and any old shoes he could find. This man had a slight smirk to his face. It wasn't a normal smile, though. It was deception. The smile of a faker, the smile of a liar, the smile of a hurt human being, the smile of a broken soul. The type of smile a man puts on right before he lays his hands on your mother. The type of smile he puts on while whipping that same hand across her face repeatedly. The type of smile that gloats when hearing her children scream at the top of their lungs for someone, anyone, to help. It was the same smile he uses with her children after pretending like nothing ever happened. The same smile he showed us when we saw her black eye, and he promised he'd never do anything to hurt her again. I copied that same smile for my professional pictures once. I woke up the morning after Easter that year, ready to finally get these pictures over with. I practiced my smile as we walked in. As I leaned against this white stool decorated with flowers, he stood next to me, breathing over my shoulder and forcing me to smile a very painful and insincere smile. He whispered to me the entire time, promising the same lies he'd promised to my mother and our family. It's okay. Everything's gonna be just fine. He gently touched my face, pulling both sides of my mouth upward, positioning my face for a smile. When my face returned to a scowl, he would apply force like he did to my mother. I've been thinking about an undeniable truth that victims of abuse share. When it's all over, people expect you to come out victorious. No one tells you how hard it is to not feel like you're still trapped. No one tells you about the endless nights that you stay up because you can't sleep, or the nights that you get shaken up out of your sleep from the nightmares of PTSD. No one tells you how to overcome those things. It's something I had to go through for myself. Although you will come out victorious, you will not come out the same as you were when you entered. You will be broken but hopeful, healed but scarred. There will be changes in yourself and the way you interact with other people. But these changes might not be apparent until you live on day by day and start feeling a mist. You are still yourself, but you are not the same, and that is okay.
My name is Soraya Robinson. I'm a senior at Central High School, and I'm a member of the swim team. My chapter is about the stereotype of Black people not knowing how to swim and the history behind it, and me learning how to swim. I was always just so excited for the summertime, and the thing I looked forward to most was going to Algonquin Park, where my cousins and I would throw water balloons and play on the big rusty slides and swings that made a clunky noise when they went up. But when I begged to go to the pool, my mom would always ask me, "What's the point if you don't know how to swim?" Then she'd tell me to go play around in the sprinklers. I didn't have the satisfaction of being in a pool. Because of the panic in my mom's heart, and because there were problems finding pools to go to. I've seen this funny meme that shows this little black kid sitting in a pool, confused and crying, and the text above him said, "When you get in the water, but remember you're Black." Thought about the stereotype of Black people and them not knowing how to swim. 64% of Black people don't know how to swim. Swimming wasn't part of Black culture in America. Historical events have kept Black people from learning how to swim. Throughout the Jim Crow era, legislators segregated schools, public parks, theaters, and pools. Black people couldn't swim because they weren't allowed to use the pools. When they did go to the pools where whites swim, they were threatened, chased out, or victims of violence. Later, funding for public pools in urban areas was decreased, while people in the suburbs, they had their own private clubs. This continued for generations, and for Blacks, learning how to swim wasn't part of their upbringing. It wasn't passed down. If your parents didn't know how to do something, they probably aren't going to be able to get you to do it. It's almost like the lack of access brought fear, and one thing that was passed down was the fear of swimming. Even though pools aren't segregated anymore, some Black people don't have the same resources as white people. To be able to swim, 2019, the city of Louisville closed down for public swimming pools, 4 of them, including the only pool in the West End, making it hard for Black people and poor citizens to be able to swim. Today in the West End, there are no pools that are free. I've always heard Black people can't swim. It's something we say as a community, but saying you can't do something is a form of negligence that can do so much harm. Can't? That's absolutely ludicrous. This Black person was going to learn how to swim.
My name is Sylvia Lance, and I'm a senior at Central High School. My chapter is called The Stars Will Whisper Back. It's about my family and being in a forever changing environment growing up and the things I've been through along the way. When I was 7 years old, we moved into a house across the street from the church that provided it to us. They called it the Oasis House, and it became our place in in the middle of the desert, our fertile spot in a chaotic world. I have memories of catching lizards in the yard and riding around on my scooter in the driveway during that summer, and building a fort in my bedroom made out of blankets and pillows. We were there for one summer and one Christmas, but then, suddenly, one day, we packed up our lives in boxes and left. We were lost with nowhere to go once again. I was becoming used to the feeling. Growing up, moving from place to place all the time, you become used to a forever changing environment, and it's embedded into your brain that that's how it's always going to be. When your friends are changing, your house is changing, your circumstances are changing, you kind of detach yourself from the words home and stability. There was an on-edge feeling that settled among my family for what was to come. I remember the pained expression that developed on my mother's face as a result of it. The look wasn't angry, but sad and hopeless. But my mom smiled to cover up her pained expression like she always did. She's the strongest person I know, and I hope one day I'll be as strong as she is. She's always had a spark in her. She's a great poet and has a wild look in her eyes when she's creating something. She never cares about what anyone thinks and does not mind embarrassing you or herself in public. I guess that's a mother thing. She would risk everything for me, and she's always had my back no matter what. The sky could be falling down outside, but I wouldn't be able to tell because I would look at her and see nothing but a comforting smile and bright, wild eyes. When I was younger, moving around so much, I began to believe home was a place. But then I began to realize as I got a little older that I had a home all along, no matter where I was. Home can be found in someone, not somewhere. There's still constant chaos in our family, but there's also frequently the strong smell of cookies that can touch you from all the way upstairs. Smiles form on all of our faces when we gather around and discuss life and the things beyond it. I've peeked at my mother sitting at the end of the table to find tears sliding quietly down her face as she managed to say a prayer. When I was young, I never understood why she would be crying during happy moments. Once I got older, I started to realize that they weren't tears of pain, but tears of happiness that came from the emotion built up within her. It came from staying strong for her family and holding all the emotions back, never breaking down. At times like these, she was reminded of how blessed we were to make it through another year.
Hi, my name is Melissa Torres. I'm a senior at Central this year. I'm in the pre-med magnet, and I am from Holguín, Cuba. I will be reading a passage from my chapter in the book, and it's called Orgullosa y Fiera. When I arrived to the US and I entered Walmart for the first time, it was like walking into a paradise. The temperature was always perfect. The rainy days were forgotten in the heat of the store. And freshness was in the air in the produce sections as the sprinklers gracefully sprayed the greens. The pop music coming and going in the background kept my family's pace. There were so many products lined up, one after the other, that it was distracting. Walmart is the center of simplicity for the life we live today. Aisle by aisle, the shopping carts gets more and more full. We can eat avocados and tomatoes even when they're not in season. And there's always bread, oil, rice, unlike the scarcity that defines Cuba. Back in Holguín, the town where I grew up, food and other essentials were limited. When things arrived at the bodega, people would run to quickly form a long queue. The soap arrived, a neighbor would say, and the line would get longer by the second. It was never guaranteed that you would get what you came for by the time you got to the front of the line. But even though some things were scarce, we had more local fresh food and a more social community. People talked to each other more. Doors were wide open. People sat on their porches so others would stop by and talk for a while. I miss the bicycle bells, and loud music at any hour of the day. In my neighborhood, people made homemade snacks to sell out of their own houses. My neighbor Araceli sold mantecados, which are shortbread cookies with a circle in the middle of guava jam. And my great-grandma, Norma, she used to sell mango and banana ice cream bars. My farmer cousin, Rafael, used to bring cachucha peppers, corn, tomatoes, and plantains to sell in the city. When I lived in Cuba, I imagined the US as a paradise where everything was perfect. No economic problems, no homelessness. Mi papá says that from a young age, he began to notice that the socialist system did not work. He told me, "The long speeches Fidel Castro gave me did not change my opinion, because what I saw on the plate at the end of the day did not reflect anything he said. I would watch American movies and the store looked so packed, like nothing I had ever seen. When my uncle came to visit from the US, he said they had everything, no scarcity at all. And now, after many conversations I had with my parents and the things that I remember, I know that my parents had it rough. They made many sacrifices for my sister and me to have a better future. More than anything, that is my greatest motivation to work hard and study a career that I love and will help them live comfortably. Thank you."
My name is Purge Archie Smith. I graduated from Central in 2020. My chapter is about my mental health, my family, and one specific day when I had a mental evaluation and how I dealt with it during and after. I expected my doctor to just say the usual. Get your health together, eat better, do more exercise, blah, blah, blah. Instead, she said she was worried about me and advised me to go to the emergency room for a mental evaluation. All I felt was anger. Why do I need an evaluation? I thought. Okay, so I have suicidal thoughts. Big whoop. I'm not gonna do anything. Maybe a few months ago, but I'm different now. I swear. My depression developed when I was in the 5th grade, when I started losing friends and felt like I couldn't trust anyone. I remember looking at my old friends' social media and seeing them hanging out with new people, and I started to think they were trying to replace me. That's when the feeling started. Of people not needing you anymore? It was a scary time. I didn't want anyone in my life to know I was depressed. Not talking about it meant I sank deeper and deeper into my head. I tried therapy and medicine, stopped both, which then messed up my mental and chemical balance more. I began to feel depressed, suicidal, and angry. I could always tell when I was about to have a breakdown, if I was paying attention. I would get cold and even get goosebumps. I felt myself moving back into a dark space, like I'm moving behind a curtain. I know this feeling isn't uncommon in our society, but I still feel alone. That night, we went to Cozaire's Children's Hospital for an evaluation. The open space of the waiting room with lots of people had my anxiety up. I tried to distract myself, keep my mind off things by watching the people in the waiting room. There were cute little kids running around being annoying. A woman gathered a bunch of kids around a fish tank to keep them focused for a little bit so they calmed down. This is RJ, and this is AJ, and CJ, and DJ. And oh, this one is PJ. The lady said, pointing to different fish. This one is AJ? One of the kids asked, pointing to a random fish. Yeah. the lady said, going along with whatever her kid was saying. She looked back at the other parents and shrugged. I was trying my hardest not to stare at people in the waiting room because I know how rude and uncomfortable it can be. I saw a father and a teenage daughter who looked so sad. The entire time, I never saw her pull out a phone or look at anything. She just sat there, thinking, trying to calm down. She and I kept giving each other glances. She looked like someone who had just been given hard news. I wanted to go sit down next to her and talk to figure out what was wrong, but I didn't have the courage for that. She was wearing a medical band and looked red in the face, as if she had been crying. I know that look. I've been so emotional lately, and it was getting hard to fight the tears. Water just does whatever it wants.
This is Halima Omar, class of 2020 from Central High School. My chapter is called Days Inside of Days, which is about my life in Kenya and Somalia and how I got here in America. Remembering Somalia can be painful. I sometimes feel like my past is a shadow that follows me everywhere I go. So much has happened in my childhood. Some things that I don't want to remember, and other things that make me laugh, sometimes from nowhere. I remember things from my past. They feel like dreams, like witnessing my best friend's death. The feeling I got when I heard my grandma had been shot, or realizing some people I used to see every day are now gone forever. Even though it was 10 years ago, those feelings and memories will never go away. I sometimes tell myself that all the things I went through were just imagined. Some days more than 100 people would die in terrorist attacks, but no one talked about it, not even the news. Mothers buried their children and kids lost their parents. Every day I used to hear gunshots like it was the 4th of July. Sometimes I used to go to sleep to the sound at night and wake up to them in the morning. It got to the point where the sound of guns and bombs became our alarm. I have always liked from my brother Abdulhab, especially when we were kids. I guess it was because we were close. I wanted to play soccer with him and his friends, so I would listen to him and do what he told me. One day when we were walking to Duxie Islamic school, and he said that he didn't want to go because he already finished the Quran, so he wanted to play with his friends. He told me that he would be back before class was over. I told him okay. When class was over, I waited for him for a while, then went home, hoping that he was already going to be there, but he wasn't home. My family asked where he was at, and I lied and told them that he went to play with his friends. As the day went by, my family started to worry and asked me again, "Where is your brother?" And I lied again. Hours later, we heard the familiar sounds. It was happening again, the sound of fighting, and this time I had no idea where my brother was at. The Somali government was fighting Al-Shabaab, and we lived in between the two groups. When they got into fights, we were affected heavily. My family gathered together and asked if everyone was there. We slowly walked to the mosque because the walls were strong enough that bullets wouldn't go through. When we got to the safe building, I looked for Abdulhab there. I thought it was all my fault, that I shouldn't have held the light for that long. When it got silent again, we looked for him. Hours later, when he came back home, as nothing happened. The whole time he was gone, he was with the Ethiopians who were in Somalia to help stop the war. Even though I was mad at him, I was also mad at myself for lying to my family. I promised myself not to lie again, especially in serious situations.